Our fourth session is on the impact of James's research and James's role in mentoring. And the moderator for this session is Cleo Caldwell, who's the Professor Emerita of Health Behavior and Health Education in the School of Public Health.
Thank you, Rich. I'm delighted to be here and to be a part of this whole activity for today. It's been a wonderful day. Have you enjoyed it so far? We're going to be continuing celebrating the life and achievements of Dr. James S. Jackson. And we also want to make sure that we are talking about the kinds of research and scholarship that he contributed that was unique to the social sciences and beyond, and also his ability to mentor. That was a huge part of his legacy. He started it young in his career, and he continued it throughout his career. His generosity of spirit and sharing knowledge and helping others become successful is a legacy that will live on forever. There are many of us who are here today who benefited directly from James and what he has done. There are others who are familiar with him through the literature. So I'm fortunate to be the moderator of this upcoming panel that's going to be talking about their experiences directly with James and a lot of his iconic achievements. I was a mentee of James from the day that I set foot on the University of Michigan's campus in the 1980s, my goodness. I don't think I'm that old, but I guess I am. Until the end, that he provided sage advice, and I still hear his words as I make decisions about what I should and should not do. As an aside, my little side story is that I came to the University of Michigan with no interest in an academic career. And I told James that. And I was coming to the second top social psychology program in the country. So people said, what do you mean you don't want an academic career? So I was doing research, and I was fortunate to be a part of James's research project for the program for research for National Survey of Black Americans when I started. And after 2 years, James said to me, I'm kicking you off my project. I said, what? I got to survive. What do you mean? And he said, you need to teach. And I said, I don't need to teach because I'm not going into academia. And he said, you need to teach. So he hooked me up with Walter Allen to be the GSI for his Black Families class. And I taught with Walter for a couple of years, then came back over to the research side of things. And the reason I share that story, because when James said to me, you need to teach, I said, no, I'm never going into academia, so I don't need to teach. He said to me, you don't know what you're going to do. So I stand before you today, having just retired as an emeritus professor here at Michigan School of Public Health, and also serving as chair of the department for 6.5 years. So I guess James had much more vision than I did. We are fortunate to have a panel of exceptional scholars and friends to discuss their experiences with James and his iconic work. I'm just going to introduce everybody now because we have many more people on this panel than we had on our previous panel. Most people will be on time, so I won't have to put up my blue card. There could be a few cautionary tales, but the good news is we have some additional time to begin this panel. So we should be moving forward. So I'm just going to take this opportunity to go ahead and introduce all panel members so that when they come up, they can just take it and take that extra time in terms of changing seats to add to their time talking a little bit. We're going to begin with M. Belinda Tucker, one of the originals. Professor Emerita of Psychiatry and Biobehavioral Sciences, and Vice Provost Emerita of the Institute of American Cultures at UCLA, and one of the original PIs of the National Survey of Black Americans. Yeah, so we've got a lot of history on this panel. She's going to be followed by, so Robert, you're going to be last now? See, he's the one I've got my eye on. So I thank Deborah Robinson for giving me this task. Okay? But Robert Joseph Taylor is the Harold R. Johnson Endowed Professor of Social Work and Director of the Program for Research on Black Americans at the Institute for Social Research here in Michigan. Again, someone who has a rich history with the beginnings of the research programs on Black Americans here. And then we have David R. Williams, Norman Professor of Public Health and Chair, Department of Social and Behavioral Sciences, Chan School of Public Health, Professor of African and African American Studies, Harvard University. David, I'm sure we could have added a whole lot more to that title, but he was being kind. Okay, and then Brianna Messick, Professor of Epidemiology, School of Public Health, University of Michigan, and another who's followed in James's footstep by starting a very important mentoring program for young scholars from around the country. And then we have Linda Chatters, Professor, Health Behavior and Health Education, School of Public Health, and the Paula Allen Mears Collegiate Professor of Social Work at the University of Michigan. Again, one of the originals from the early work of James throughout the end of his life. And then we have a newbie, Mosi Afatunji, Assistant Professor, Department of African American Studies and Department of Sociology, University of Wisconsin at Madison. And he started in your postdoc years with the program and continues to be involved. So you probably know them all from their work. They're all very well-known scholars, and we are very fortunate that they made time to come here to honor James. So with that, let me turn the mic over to Belinda.
Thank you so much, Cleo. And thank you, conveners, and Deborah Robinson in particular, for providing this extraordinary opportunity to celebrate and appreciate James. I really, really am deeply touched by all of this. Now, some of you know that I am pinch hitting for Patricia Gurin today. I did have a long talk with her on Friday, so she's fine, but she couldn't make it today. That's a fairly daunting undertaking, subbing for Pat. And I have viewed this task initially with some trepidation because this group and this meeting should have benefited from Pat's unique observations and analyses. However, I did come to realize that only someone other than Pat could discuss and reflect on how Pat and Jerry's mentoring of James powerfully influenced his own mentoring behavior. Although there are now programs and courses that attempt to teach people to mentor, I think most of us learn to be effective members by having the good fortune to have had superior mentors in our lives. Now, Pat's original plan for this presentation was to examine James's pre-NSB activities and mentorships to see whether and how they contributed to his ultimate career path and the components that he viewed as essential elements of any successful research program. So I've decided to pursue that aim as well. I looked around a bit for definitions of mentoring in order to better frame James's behaviors and beliefs regarding his relationships with students, trainees, and colleagues, but I concluded that, like porn, we just know good mentoring when we experience it or see it. Mentoring provides professional socialization and guidance, but especially with mentees of color and from other marginalized, under-resourced, and disregarded populations, mentoring typically also involves life counseling, problem solving, confidence building, and often financial guidance and support. You find a way to make it crystal clear that your mentees matter. James, Pat, and Jerry did this in spades. They also modeled behaviors that would lead not just to individual success, but group and societal advancement. So if you trained under any of the three of them, you knew you weren't just getting a degree, you had a mission in life. I don't know anything about James's mentors in grad school, and life, although I'm assuming that they were all exceptional. But I do know a bit about the guidance and support he received when he first arrived at the University of Michigan as its very first regular Black faculty member, which happened to be the very same year that I came to Michigan as a graduate student. However, when James arrived, he was already firmly planted on that trail that led him to pursue dreams that others had not even imagined. In an interview with Alan Kraut, conducted in the south of France, where else, right, on his 70th birthday, James spoke of the defining insights he received from having spent quality time with some of the most revolutionary icons of our time, including the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Jesse Jackson, and he'd like to say, James Hoffa. In 1969, James, as a graduate student, and surprised that we didn't hear this story from AJ, was part of a group of Black Student Psychological Association members and key members of the Association of Black Psychologists, both newly formed at the time, that confronted George Miller as he was about to deliver his inaugural presidential address at APA, the American Psychological Association convention that year. And James described them as being dashiki'd in Big Froze. And the group demanded that the organization address factors affecting Black progress in the discipline, including bias testing, the lack of employment opportunities for Blacks graduating with psychology degrees, and poor recruitment and support for Black graduate students. Now, he was just 25 at the time. But through these organizations, I think he was exposed to Black psychologists, and AJ certainly kind of mapped out that whole history, who were actively confronting the direction and the failures of the discipline. Key among them were Joseph White and Robert Williams, also referred to as the fathers of Black psychology. So when James entered the University of Michigan, an institution, as you've heard before, he tellingly never left, he had already benefited from crucial guidance from both icons and colleagues within the discipline, who I think presented clear models of scholar activism. I have come to believe that the significance of this crucial period during James's years of professional development really can't be overstated. He was embedded in a cadre of supportive, similarly motivated and goal-directed Black men largely, who were both soulmates and mentors. Maybe we'll call that a convoy of social support. But critically, James also developed a deep and enduring bond with both Pat and Jerry Gurin, who could provide guidance on how to navigate and advance in this particular system at the University of Michigan. Now, I want to think that out of this set of experiences came an appreciation on James's part for the role of what I'm calling mentored camaraderie in teaching, in training, and in advancement of science, but also aimed toward increasing Black participation in the discipline. The very first research project that I worked on with James was conducted in a large, predominantly Black high school in Detroit. Now, this was pre-NSBA, to examine factors affecting dropout behavior and other aspects of student life. It was part of a larger program of NIMH-funded research being conducted by Phil Newman, also another Michigan social psych grad, on adaptive behavior in varying high school environments. So to jog my memory about the project and to answer Pat's questions, I actually called one of the other graduate students on the project, Ron Jennings, to try to think through those years. Now, we were so young that we were often mistaken for students at the high school. Imagine that. And that posed some difficulties. Other grad students on the project were Phil Dukes and Laura Head. In fact, Ron's dissertation came out of that project. And as students, we were full participants in the design of that study, including selection of measures, questionnaire items, and how we conducted the study. I mean, I was a first-year graduate student then. Our research meetings tackled the tough questions of measurement, given the serious concerns we had about validity of those measures in this setting, but what was also needed to conduct a study, such a study. Ron, James, and I together published two papers from that project, with Ron as first author on one and I on the other. Now, I think this is a really significant point because James was very, very early in his career, obviously in need of publications and first authorships, yet he generously encouraged us, early graduate students, to take the lead and the credit on those papers, just as Pat and Jerry often did. So our mentorships consisted of full participation in study design as early graduate students. I was, again, in my first year, and in fact, I think I was James's first dissertation student. Direct confrontation of the limitations of our discipline and the act of publishing. So I think these features became signature elements of James's mentorship style, as well as the programs of research that he later developed. So further in our discussion, Ron and I concluded that the measurement issues we regularly confronted were seriously affecting our ability to conduct quality research. We had little confidence in the measures of beliefs, attitudes, and attributes that were used in that study on Black adolescents that had been developed and tested on middle-class white populations. So something needed to be done. And I think this was the germ of NSBA. And this is where Jerry Gurin's mentorship and experience became critical. James, like many others, greatly admired Jerry's now classic Americans View Their Mental Health study, a groundbreaking study that was conducted in the 1950s. Now imagine, no computers, no select typewriters. In the 1950s, and they published a book in 1960 with Joe Veroff and Sheila Feld. A representative sample of 2,460 Americans over 21 were interviewed about life adjustment, perceived problems, and how they coped with their expressed needs. A partial replication was carried out in '76 by Joe Veroff, Libby Duvon, and Dick Kolka. It seemed obvious to James that a national study of Black Americans based on probability sampling was the critical first step to resolving all the issues that we had encountered in our ability to understand a variety of social psychological processes. Such a study had never been done. Pat revealed to me last week that Jerry told James at some point, why don't you just write up a bunch of little studies and publish the heck out of them instead of embarking on a quest that everybody else seemed to think was impossible to accomplish, which I know grew out of Jerry's concern that James needed to get tenure. He later told Pat how grateful he was that James had ignored his advice completely. So James's full plan involved his vision of mentorship, including full student engagement in the study's design, the development of measures, the conduct of the study, analysis, and write-up. By my calculation, James was maybe, 29 or 30 at that moment? The products, of course, of that vision are now professors, researchers, university and corporate executives, policymakers, and leaders in all manner of industry in this country and others. So as both Sheldon Danziger and Rob Sellers have pointed out, James played the long game, and he clearly won. Thank you.
Press.
Oh, yeah, that's me. Yeah. Okay, just want to see what's up here. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Again, I'm Robert Taylor. I am the third director of the Program for Research on Black Americans. Obviously, James is the first, and my colleague Woody Neighbors is the second director. I also want to mention that the major funding apparatus that's keeping the program going right now is the Michigan Center for Urban African American Aging Research, called MUCWAR for short, and Peter Lichtenberg is a co-director with me, as well as Amanda Woodward. So before I start my 150 slides, I'm sure that you will have some patience with me. I am going to go. I want to wake Cleo up a little bit. I am going to go pretty quickly over these slides. So first, I just want to share that we have written a fair amount of stuff up on our contributions. This is one American psychologist This is a special issue dedicated to James, Journal of Aging and Health. And there's an article here that deals with James's contribution to, and the PRBA's contribution to the field of gerontology. This is a book edited by Linda Chatters. Again, with a forward, dedicated to James. This is a paper by Brianna, again, talking about James's contribution, and in particular, Makwar's contribution to aging research. And David Williams doesn't know yet, but we're writing a paper together on James's, on our contribution to sociology. And we have a lot of stuff on our YouTube channel, including great interviews of James done by our own Mosi Mpenjuji. So let's see. Again, my role today is really giving a quick overview, okay? So I'm gonna go through some of these slides pretty quickly, just to let you know. So again, we started officially in 1976. I think I came on board in 1978. I was a graduate student then. I worked really hard to get on board with PRBA, because I just had a feeling that there's a good future there. It's really impossible to know all the people that have been mentored by James, both directly and indirectly. And so, and even now I find things out that I did not know before, which is extremely helpful. But we've had a strong interdisciplinary focus, and as you see, there have been students and postdocs in all of these areas, which is really unique for most areas of research, in particular, even places that are interdisciplinary like ISR. And one thing you see is that the people who worked with PRBA have, over time, that's what you have with the mature center, have done very well. This is from a paper that talks about citation rank. This is the top 2% of scientists in the world, regardless of fields, social sciences and just all sciences together. And you see the numbers here. And also we have Lisa Barnes, and Lisa's here, and Karen Lincoln in terms of the yearly rankings. This is the lifetime rankings that I'm giving you, showing. This is when we talk about the National Survey of Black Americans, and these are the PIs of it. And what I want to talk about now is these are the graduate students who worked there, and you can see their accomplishments, because we're all, as we said, we have a recently retired person here with us, but everybody here in red continued to work. Many went away like me, but came back, but continue to work here at the University of Michigan. This is from a citation, a paper on the citation ranking of African-American faculty in the field of social work, and these are the top cited faculty. Again, this is not me just making this stuff up. This is from a published paper, but for time, I'm not gonna show you the paper. Yeah. This is the same, Pioneers in African-American Gerontology, from an article in the Gerontologist. Again, all of us are associated with PRBA. This is really amazing. So when you look at the history, let's get this straight. Now, I could be wrong about this, but I don't think I am. The history of Black women, full professors in public health and social work, all have had some level of PRBA training. Now, we're not talking about 20 people, okay? We're talking about 6. So to be fair, but still, it's a pretty amazing fact. This is just a few of the people here in terms of HBCU leadership. And HBCU is historically Black colleges and universities. And I know Angela, I saw her earlier, she's here. This is governmental service. So you can take a quick look at that. Leadership positions of some of the alumni. Again, we just don't have the time to go through everybody. And to be honest, I don't know everybody, okay? So we've done a pretty good job. And again, a few more. And again, including Phil Bowman, who's here, was also a founding professor with NSBA, And you see here also founding director of the National Center of Institutional Diversity. And if you look at our alumni, and this is not all I have, I've just gone through the Program for Research on Black Americans alumni, but this is not adding in the Michigan Center for Urban African American Aging Research. But we have 22 named chairs and 25 others who are full professors. And some of the people have no idea that their pictures are here, like Kendrick is here, and he's the provost at Morehouse. And then Nick Jones at the Census Bureau, real close. Rashid Njai at the CDC. Anna Riley at the Center for Scientific Review in terms of with NIH, and she got one of the highest awards that NIH gives. Prudence Carter, who's now at Brown, but she was a former dean at Berkeley. Jackie Matisse, that many of us know, who's dean at Newark. Thomas Leviste, a dean at Tulane. Waldo Johnson, again, people in social work. But actually, Waldo knows everybody, so I'm sure people outside of Daphne Watkins, I know Daphne was here. I'm not sure if she's here now. She's here at Michigan. Vicki Mays. Oh, I think we all know this guy who's at the panel. So again, David Williams. Derek Hamilton, a major policy person with the, I can't remember, some baby bonds. Oh, yes. Derek Griffith. Oh, Derek was here? Okay. Jackie Taylor. And Kerwin Charles, who's in terms of Macquarie, Dean of Management. And again, I could really go on. We're going to stop in a second or two. Reuben Miller, who just won the MacArthur Award. In terms of now our younger people, we have Mosi, who's here, Ann, who's, I think, somewhere here. Yeah. And then our really young people who are also here, Christina Cross and Bernadine. Bernadine is a postdoc, and Christine is a new professor at Harvard. And our really new person, Marcus Andrews, who just finished his dissertation about a month or two ago in public health. So we have a lot of workshops. This is one in 2019. I know it's a celebration of life, but life continues. I want to send this on a really nice and positive note. Number one, I met my wife, Linda Chatters, my very beautiful wife, at the Program for Research on Black Americans as students. And no. That was 19, well, we got married in 1984. Okay, yeah, I had to think hard there. And I'm mentioning this, number one, a lot of people, just about all the PRBA came to our wedding that was in Cincinnati. So everybody drove down and spent a weekend with us. But I'm mentioning this picture right here. School of Social Work has always been a really good supporter of PRBA, but I want to mention this because these two who met at that program just got married in June. Okay, and they sent me this picture to let us know about that. I have just one or two quick stories just to end. We used to also call James the Energizer Bunny, but we also called him the Tasmanian Devil. Okay? Everything we said to James, everything I'm saying here is we told him to his face. It's like he knows that. He messed with us, we messed with him. One time, when I was a student, I really wanted to work on a research project, and he gave me a job. I was very happy. We're working, photocopying 5 in the morning, and James goes, "Where's everybody?" And I go, "It's 5 in the morning." And then he's so like, "Oh yeah, okay. So I understand." So again, I'm gonna end it here. Again, this is the legacy of James Jackson, and it continues. Thank you.
It is truly an honor and privilege for me to be a part of this great celebration of James Jackson's life. Good to be back in Michigan, and at this time of the year, it's also great to be a Michigan Wolverine. I first met James when I was a graduate student in sociology here at the University of Michigan. I worked in the social environment and health area in the Serve Research Center. My mentor, Jim House, is here. And I would often run into James at ISR. He was kind, friendly, always jovial. I was familiar with the PRBA program and worked one semester with Shirley Hatchett on a paper, but I was not, as a student, very engaged with PRBA. I completed my PhD and started my career as a faculty at Yale. Fast forward to 1992, all was going well for me at Yale. I had just been promoted to associate professor, had received the Senior Faculty Fellowship Awards, which means I was not teaching for the next year. And I was quite happy and contented to be there. But some faculty in sociology and at SRC were intent on recruiting me back to University of Michigan. I wasn't really excited about it, but I decided that I would come visit Michigan, give a lecture, just to get them off my back. But I had no intentions to leave Yale. During my visit to Michigan, I met many people, including spending quality time with James Jackson, and who described to me all that was happening and all that his vision was for PRBA. James was not the only factor why I came back, but he certainly was one of the important factors why, by the end of my visit, I decided that because so much was happening here at Michigan, I did not have a single professional reason to remain at Yale. And I happily returned to ISR. I was based at the Serve Research Center, but I came back as an active member of the PRBA, collaborating with James and my other great colleagues, many of them here today. Recently, I checked my CV in preparing for these comments and discovered that I have 36 papers on my CV that are co-authored with James. By the way, one of the things I learned while working with James was he would sometimes say, as he talked about a paper, he said, "I'll write the first draft." And I soon realized that when James said that he was going to write the first draft, it was his generous heart speaking. But he was so busy that he would not have time to write the first draft. But if I did a stab at the first draft, it was amazing the insightful critique and feedback I would get from James. Every single paper that I have ever written that is co-authored with James was so much better after James had read it and provided me with feedback. So I want to tell you about one paper specifically that I co-authored with James. It is the most cited paper on my CV. There are more than 5,000 citations to this 1997 paper. It was a paper that first introduced to the scientific world the everyday discrimination scale, a measure of discrimination that I had developed with enormous support and help from James. I had come back to Michigan and I was very interested in quantifying the impact of racism on health. And I decided to begin by focusing on interpersonal discrimination as one important component of racism. And so I began to immerse myself in the qualitative research that had been published by people like sociologist Joe Fagan looking at middle-class African Americans, and by Philomena Esse, the Dutch scholar who had studied Black immigrants in the Netherlands and African American women in California. And I shared with James this idea I had of developing measures of discrimination and possibly using the Detroit area study, a practicum in survey research out of the sociology department, as a laboratory that we could use to develop and test measures of discrimination. And James was just so very supportive of this idea. I have written about this elsewhere, in which I described the process and I said that James was the wind beneath my wings. What did James do? First, he endorsed and supported the idea. As an early career scholar, it meant so much that a senior and visionary person of James's stature to endorse the idea of developing these measures. Second, James volunteered. The Detroit Area Study is a 3-course sequence. James volunteered to co-teach the Detroit Area Study with me. Now, I was receiving academic credit for teaching these courses. To the best of my knowledge, James received no academic credit, but showed up for every class co-teaching the course with me. Third, he decided to raise funds to increase the sample size of the Detroit Area Study. So the actual sample size was 3 times the size of a normal study because he wanted to have a large enough African American population for the analysis that we would do. And fourth, James was a full collaborator in the development of the measures of discrimination. I would come up with a draft, we would meet, we would talk about the science and what prior research talked about, how we best measure discrimination and how we word it and frame it in ways that African Americans would respond to. And I benefited enormously from all this wisdom and guidance that James showered on me. We developed the Everyday Discrimination Scale. Today, it is the most widely used measure of discrimination in the world. We also developed 2 other measures, the Major Experiences of Discrimination Scale and the Heightened Vigilance Scale. The literature suggested that discrimination was not only based on the actual experience, but a threat of discrimination and the steps that we would take to protect ourselves. One of my doctoral students 2 years ago did a meta-analysis and found that there were more than 450 published peer-reviewed papers from around the world using the Everyday Discrimination Scale. This scale would not have existed without the kindness, generosity, vision, and creativity of James Jackson. I am forever grateful to him for what he has contributed to me personally and professionally. Longfellow said, "Lives of great men all remind us that we too can make our lives sublime, and departing leave behind us footprints on the sands of time." I stand here today forever grateful for the very large footprints that James left on my life as a mentor, as a colleague, and as a friend. And I'm thankful for the contributions that he has enabled me to make to science. Thank you.
I had to go after David, huh? I want to thank Deborah for all the work that she's done in organizing today. Tony, fam, it's wonderful to be able to celebrate James here with you. So again, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Brianna Mezek, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today as we celebrate the lasting impact of Dr. James Jackson, his impact on various fields of research, on educational institutions, and on his collaborators and colleagues. Today, I want to make just a few comments on his impact as a mentor. So I met James in 2007, having just defended my dissertation, and in the first days of a postdoctoral fellowship with the Robert Wood Johnson Health and Society Scholars Program, that at the time was based at the Center for Social Epidemiology and Population Health, a center that I am now honored to be the director of. For those of you who have been through a doctoral program, let me ask you to remember back to that state of mind that you were likely in right after you defended your thesis. At least for me, and I don't think I'm alone in this, I felt like both a complete imposter and adrift, as there was now no clearly defined set of tests or hurdles or committee meetings or whatever for me to overcome. Instead, it was now time for me to do my own research. How exactly? So in 2007, James, as we know, of course we all know, was of course director of the Institute for Social Research. and he was busy. And so it took me many months of emailing to get an initial meeting with him. And in the interim, I was advised by numerous people that I was on a clock, right? I had a 2-year fellowship, and that he was simply too busy to work with me, and that I should really identify a different mentor to work with. But I did not listen to them, in part because clearly this man knew what he was doing. That is why he had been asked to lead a cutting-edge institution like the Institute for Social Research. So that I did eventually get a meeting, and when it finally arrived, that meeting with James turned out to be a key inflection point in my scientific research and understanding of myself as a scholar. I still remember sitting in the small room outside of his office in RCGD, with him telling me about his environmental affordances model for the first time, and my initial skepticism. I told him, it doesn't work like that. And his response was, that is an empirical question. And the rest you can read about in numerous papers in the fields that have been published in the fields of public health psychology and sociology. I worked with James for the first 15 years of my career, which coincided with the last 15 years of his. I reflect on this a lot now that I am quote unquote mid-career myself. That is, what was he hoping to accomplish in the latter part of his career, and how did working with me fit into those goals? At least part of that answer was to develop training structures for interdisciplinary health scientists. James co-directed the Center for Integrative Approaches to Health Disparities, or CIAD, which is an effort led by Dr. Ana Diaz-Rue and in collaboration with the Jackson Heart Study. This center had a training core that was led here by our very own Dr. Cleo Caldwell. And every year, it brought together young researchers who were working on minority health and health disparities research for a couple of days a year for a symposium, typically in Jackson, Mississippi. While only 3 days each year, those symposium were critically important to those of us who were just beginning our careers. People that I still am in regular contact and whose work I follow now, like Dana Johnson, Tanae Lewis, Shanita Sealy Jefferson, Mahasan Mujahideen, and Kiari Kershaw. They provided a space for connecting with others, for encouraging others, and for receiving encouragement, and for making the challenges of the academy transparent. It was an interdisciplinary, cooperative learning environment, one that saw the value of every member there. It was clear that James, both through directly and then through mentees like Cleo, knew how to create such an environment. When the grant mechanism, the NIH grant mechanism that supported CIAD was sunsetted by NIMHD in 2017, James and I started talking about other ways to recreate that learning environment using a different mechanism. In 2019, we were successful in this effort by receiving an R25 to launch the Michigan Integrative Wellbeing and Inequality Training Program, which we call MIWI for short. The problem that MIWI is trying to solve is the lack of opportunity for scientists from social science disciplines and clinical and biological disciplines to work together and learn from each other on issues that are critical to minority health and health disparities. We implement a team mentoring approach that is really incredibly modeled on the work that James implemented in CIAD and in Muckwar. We held our first summer institute virtually in June 2020. At a time of tremendous uncertainty, pain, anger, and frustration in the world. And that institute, while entirely virtual, provided a harbor in the storm for the 15 early career scientists that began the program with us that year. Since that time, MIWI has trained over 60 interdisciplinary health scientists from across the US and internationally, and as this network of scholars has grown in size, it has also grown in complexity, seeding new collaborations among the scholars themselves who are pursuing new ideas on how to address health disparities. Many of them are here today: Juan Del Toro, Wadey Kind, Deanna Bird, and Dan Gann. We received an excellent score in our renewal application this year, and we are hopeful to be able to continue this work for many years to come. When James passed, in addition to intense grief, I felt a nagging anxiety and fear. For the past 15 years of my career, again, which were also the first 15 years of my career, I had been walking with him, initially, or sorry, I had been working with him, initially walking behind, but eventually walking beside him. And now I felt like I was at the front of the line, alone. And I didn't feel confident about where I should step next. And I now understand that I didn't know where to step next. Oh, sorry. And now I understand that as the intergenerational nature of mentoring, that mentors lead you as far as they can, and then, as they must, they pass you the baton. And as I walk with that baton in hand now, MeWe scholars and students walk behind and beside me, and I am confident that together we will be able to continue to take steps in the right direction because of the type of mentorship that I had from James. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. This has been a wonderful day. I feel full in so many different ways of hearing everyone's experiences of James Jackson. I'm going to be talking about mentoring, and we heard a lot about it, so I'm going to be repeating some of the things that you've shared about what it was like to be mentored by James. But I'm going to start with a quote, and in preparation for this, I looked through some pages through ISR and the University of Michigan for quotes or information about James, and this one is just so apropos. None of us get here on our own. No one becomes successful without the assistance of others. I know because it's been the people in my life, past and present, students, family, mentors, that have guided me over all these years. James S. Jackson. I couldn't ask for a better, introduction to what I'd like to say about James as a mentor. Again, so many rich experiences that have been shared, but I will tell you a little bit about how I think about James, and I'll tell you a little bit about how he mentored in a tough love sort of way, which I'm forever grateful for. So I'm pleased to be able to speak with you today about my mentor, James S. Jackson, and his many accomplishments as a mentor and a colleague, and his impact on the PRBA mentoring group, which grew out of his accomplishments, which grew out of his example as a mentor. In the few minutes I have, I will attempt to provide a sense of his impact as a mentor, although you've already heard from a number of people about what he did, why he did it, and the finesse that he expressed in that role. I would also like to encourage each of you to complete 2 tasks during your remaining time here during the celebration of life. And I'll start by my comments by stating that James was a very versatile mentor and approached mentoring in a variety of different ways, depending on the person he was mentoring, depending on their level of development, and depending on the specific life circumstances, because he would take all that in and then begin to mentor. As an example of his versatility, I encourage you to ask others about their experiences and recollections of James as a mentor. And you've already heard quite a bit already about James. But if you have the opportunity to speak further with those of us who've been mentored by James, you will hear stories of how he seemed to understand exactly what was needed at the particular moment of a student's journey and development. This could be overall encouragement, support for an idea, extending his friendship to you, navigating academia, or facilitating a professional connection. These are all important mentoring things that he did. His ability to do so, to be so versatile as a mentor, reflected what I believe to be his innate and deep understanding of people, a willingness to acknowledge common ground and shared experiences, and a strong sense of empathy for others. Before the wrongful death of Trayvon Martin in Florida, before that sparked a movement of national and global impact. James Jackson's vision and his work said very simply, Black Lives Matter. He said it in his research, he said it in his theoretical writings. He wanted to make sure that Black lives were seen and that they were seen as worthy and that they mattered. He believed that survey research focused on Black American populations should be based on nationally representative samples and should seek to examine within group difference. And this was not what people were doing back then, definitely not what people were doing. To do less is to foster and promote stereotypes and monolithic depictions of the lives of Black Americans. Many of us will always remember and embody in our own work the significance of his vision and guiding purpose. As students, postdoctoral scholars, and early career faculty, our association with James and PRBA provided us with the opportunity to put into practice his vision and mission to make Black life seen, really seen. Throughout his work over many years, James initiated and directed the Program for Research on Black Americans. This was a pivotal experience for teaching and mentoring literally scores, as Robert has indicated in his slide, scores of Black students, postdoctoral scholars, and early career faculty. In directing the work of the PRBA, his actions, investments in, and dedication to us as a mentor communicated to us that we mattered. And that for a doctoral student, for someone who's starting out, is so important. James saw us in a way that was authentic and deeply caring. James also had high expectations for those he mentored, and he imparted the importance of the work we were doing in several ways. His sense of, and it's been talked about today, extreme optimism, and can-do attitude toward the work was infectious. He was also willing to do whatever work was necessary to move the work forward, and often led by example. His mentorship allowed us to fully embrace and celebrate being unapologetically Black and unapologetically a scholar. I was quoting Amosi right there. As a mentor, James often seemed tireless and willing to promote and guide those he mentored. But I believe he also imparted the notion that, from the mentor's perspective, time is valuable, not to be misspent on someone who was not ready. Mm-hmm. So I think that there's some provisos there, which brings me to a very special personal recollection of how his mentoring was pivotal to my life and direction as a student. So, as a doctoral student, I experienced what I call the post-prelim slump, or the doldrums. You do the prelim and it's like, now what? Having obtained ABD status, I was for a time somewhat rudderless and just not moving forward toward the dissertation prospectus. I happened to encounter James outside of ISR, during which he confronted me about my lack of progress. I was not expecting this, and it was very awkward conversation, and I was stunned, taken aback, and quite frankly mortified, because he was absolutely right. But what I took away from that encounter was that James cared enough about me and my future that he felt it necessary to have the conversation, or what I call intervention, to get me back on track. It worked. By the next week, I had a conversation with him about working with PRBA. This is an experience I share with the students I come in contact and that I mentor in the hopes that they can begin to understand that growth is developmental. No one is perfect, and their experiences are not unique, and they're really shared by other students as well. So, as we know, former graduate students and postdoctoral scholars who were mentored at PRBA have gone on to become widely recognized experts in their fields. I won't go into it. Robert, gave us an idea of all those areas. Mine was just a summation, but I will go on to say that having been mentored by James has had a big influence in shaping the PRBA mentoring group, which Robert and I now co-host and co-sponsor. The mentoring group has had several iterations over the years, but remains an important resource for students, postdoctoral scholars, and early career faculty, those here at Michigan, as well as those from other universities. Currently, Robert Taylor and I co-host the mentoring group, which has 66 members, 13 of which are affiliated with other universities such as Columbia, NYU, Wisconsin, Prairie View A&M. So the magic of Zoom allows this to happen, even given different time zones. The current composition of the mentoring group includes members from social work, public health, psychology, sociology, medicine, and nursing. Again, interdisciplinary, interprofessional collection of scholars that come together. The mentoring group covers topics and issues related to all aspects of academia, particularly as they relate to the experiences of racial and ethnic minoritized scholars. We meet monthly during the school year by Zoom. At the request of group members, we also provide opportunities for individuals to have practice presentations for job talks, for dissertation defenses, and conference presentations. They just let us know they'd like to do that, and we get together as many people as we can to serve as an audience. So in summarizing the experience of having had James S. Jackson as a mentor, I would use the words engaged, high expectations, generous, caring, transparent, tireless, fun-loving, and friend. And finally, for that second task, as you continue to talk with and fellowship with others this afternoon, share with them what words you would use to describe James Jackson and how he mentored and or inspired you in your work and life. Thank you very much.
How many of y'all knew James's middle name? I am very honored to be here today. I have benefited greatly from the program for research on Black Americans. I continue to be a scientist at the program. And I'm happy to say that I'm also a scientist at the Institute for Research on Race and Public Policy, which was built by Phil Bowman. I'm lucky enough to have won a number of awards, but the one that I'm the most proud of, and the one that I feel the most weight for, is being the inaugural James Jackson Emerging Scholar Award. I want to thank Robert Taylor, who has loved me, supported me, even through our disagreements, for the best birthday gift I could imagine, which was inviting me here today to talk on my birthday about one of my most beloved mentors. Thank you. So I want to begin by sharing a little story about James. Eventually, I would be doing a postdoc here, and I think it was about 2014. And I think either the new wing had been, the paperwork had been signed. I think maybe the thing was under construction. I'm not entirely sure. But I remember teasing James. And I said, you know what, man? We gonna make sure they name that wing after you. And James, no, no. And so I'm so happy today. Later on, we will be naming a part of the Institute for Social Research after James Sidney Jackson. I also want to thank Phil Bowman. If it wasn't for Phil, I wouldn't have met James, Rob, everybody. When I was an undergrad at UIC, Phil was there, and through a range of different situations, I began working with Phil as an undergraduate research assistant, SROP, McNair, whatever. If he had some extra money, he would support me. I often joke and say that my degree in African American Studies should be called Conversations with Phil.
Long conversations.
Exactly. And in one of those conversations, Phil said to me, you ever heard of James Jackson? And I said, no, I don't know what you're talking about. The next thing I knew, at the time, he was director of the Institute for Research on Race and Public Policy at UIC. I was his faithful undergraduate research assistant, and also I did a lot of other things around. Well, he had arranged for a panel on Black psychology, past, present, and future. And I was to be on the panel with James, and also the cameraman. And so I found myself there, I think it was 2002, on a panel with James about psychology. I was a double major. I was psych and Black studies. I won't say who won the debate on the panel. But the next time that I met James, or the next major memory that I had about James was during my dissertation. The NSAL was newly out of the field, and I was proposing, and Phil talked to James, and James agreed to let me use restricted versions of the data. And so I thought, therefore, I should come up here and do the training on how to use the data. And James was one of the speakers in the training. And after he did his shindig, there was a little break or whatever, and so I go chasing down the hallway to catch James. And I said, hey, man, I just want to let you know what I'm doing. This is what he said, I know. I've been following you. And I was like, what? And I just can't say enough about how he quoted almost kind of chapter and verse some of my early ideas at that time. And I couldn't imagine how he would be able to retain that stuff in such great detail without me knowing. In any case, I'd eventually come here to the University of Michigan as a postdoc through the NCID postdoc, which was also led by Phil and eventually Tabby. And so I was honored. I got to be here with James and Robert and Phil and for the year. And maybe about 8 or 9 months into the postdoc, I was leaving ISR at maybe like, I don't know, it was dark outside. It was like 10-something p.m. It's a summer, so you know how it gets, stays light long here. And I remember catching James in the hallway that night, and who else said it? Called him young man. He'd always be like, good evening, young man, how you doing? And we got into the elevator, and I was talking about just trying to get the work done, et cetera, and I looked at him and I said, you know, I don't know how you get all of this done. I said, at what point did you cross over from being human to superhuman? And he laughed, and he just said, well, you know, I never slept much. And I said, got it. So over the years, there's been a lot of people that I've come across that have known James, and Robert stole my thunder. He was often referred to as the Tasmanian devil, which, you know, for those of us, most of us probably have some kind of memory of that. We're all old enough for that. You know, sometimes the Tasmanian devil could be misconstrued as sort of being overwhelmed by the things that they're doing and out of control, et cetera, and so forth. But that was never the case with James. In fact, underneath it all, he was deeply pensive and knew what he was doing. Ever since I was in grad school, people have been telling me I've been doing too much. People bring me into their office, be like, Mosi, you're overcommitted, you got too many things going on. I'd be like, all right, that's great. I'm gonna stop the project with you. They'd be like, no, not my project. And so in that way, I enjoy being called overcommitted in some ways because of that, because I think we had that in some common. While I've learned a lot from James over the years, all kinds of different small lessons and big lessons, one of the things that I think is particularly important that I learned from him is to think sort of under the data or beyond the data. One of my favorite stories about this is that James had collected 3 generational data as part of the NSAL that was such an innovative data collection strategy that we did not have math to analyze it. And that's when I met Rich. Rich and I were on a committee to try to figure out what kind of math do we need to come up with to analyze this data. And so as important as rich quality data was to James, he often had an imagination that preceded the data, or if you will, got under the data. This is one of my favorite pictures. What you're seeing there are 4 generations of Black social science. Of course, there's James, there's Phil, there's Tyrone Foreman, and myself. And that picture on the side was taken right there when James won his Distinguished Diversity Scholar Award. The point of this slide is to not only highlight multiple generations of mentorship, investment, learning, various kinds of contributions, But the most important part of this thing is looking forward to 5, 6, ... N of this tradition. I have to tell you guys, I am both so full of joy and love today with all of the people that I have grown to know and love on account of the Program for Research on Black Americans. And I have loved to hear about all of the different histories involved. But as one of the younger people here, I'm also concerned. Not only am I concerned more generally about the fall in survey response rates, period. Not only am I, looking at real-time AI-based methods for understanding, seeing where we're going there, but underneath it all, I'm concerned about where the PRBA will be in the next 10, 15, 20, 50 years. We have worked very hard to support folks. And I have had some wonderful conversations with Robert Taylor, Rich Gonzalez, Kate Cagney, Robert Sellers, and others. And I'm here to tell you, is Sheldon still here? Did he leave? We have some ideas. The National Survey of Black Americans was collected in circa 1980. The National Survey of American Life was collected in 2004, or got out of the field in 2004. Some of my favorite conversations with James towards the end of my postdoc were about going back to the field. And so I'm here to echo James and say it's time to get back to the field. And I'm excited about the conversations that I've been having about support for those kinds of activities. And I am excited about the future of the Program for Research on Black Americans. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You can see how well disciplined this panel was. I know. We're going to be ending this panel, but I wanted everyone to give a round of applause to this panel for not only their insights, for not only their contributions to science, for not only their contributions to mentoring, but following instructions. They're very good. So, turn it back over to you.
Now we have a special award to give now that Robert Taylor is going to announce.
So, again, in my position as the director of the Program for Research on Black Americans, as you know, the inaugural recipient of the James Jackson Emerging Scholar Award was Mosi. But the second award winner is Dr. Katrina Ellis. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Dr. Ellis's great research. So again, Dr. Ellis is an assistant professor in the School of Social Work, and she's also the inaugural Rogel Scholar in Cancer Health Equity at the Rogel Cancer Center. Her program of research and scholarship explores the experience of cancer within African American populations, with a focus on the family as a caregiving system. Her work embodies an emphasis on reducing health disparities in cancer treatment and outcomes among African Americans. The goals of her research is to support the health of families facing multiple coexisting illnesses. Please join me in a strong and warm congratulations to Dr. Ellis in receiving the James Jackson Emerging Scholar Award.
Well, thank you, Dr. Taylor. It really is a tremendous honor to receive this award. I know that Dr. Jackson inspired not only me, but countless scholars here at U of M and around the world. And I've had the privilege of being mentored by so many people who Dr. Jackson mentored. And it's my hope that my work can really reflect the standard of excellence that he has set for research with Black Americans. So thank you very much.
Rich and I are here together to close this session. Tony, I don't know if you wanted to come up at all. We had chatted about this and thought we would decide in the moment,
So my children are here, so I have to be short because they want to go. I will say just a few things. I met James my first day of graduate school at Wayne State. He was like 2 years ahead of me in graduate school, and he was, this will surprise everyone, in charge of welcoming all the new students. So he welcomed me, and we were together over 50 years. They were great years, as you might guess. He would be completely embarrassed by today. But I would say, for those of you who are moved by what you heard today, go forth and do the same thing. We're all capable. Go forth and create the next generation, share with your peers and those who come after you. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it.
optimism point, and I hope we leave this day with that extraordinary optimism and the motivation to engage in the kind of work that James really, right, did each and every day with so many in this room and with such rigor and so little sleep. Now we understand how he was able to get so much done. I really think this day was glorious. I was trying to think of the right kind of term, but so much has emerged from these interactions and conversations, and I'm so thankful to all of you. Again, thank you to Deborah for putting this wonderful session and set of sessions together. To Anna Massey, to Catherine Pearson, and to all our ISR colleagues for engaging in all of the planning that made this seem so seamless. Rich, I don't know if you want to add anything.
I just wanted to say thank you, everyone, for coming. It's been a wonderful day.
Right. And thanks to our last session.